Good morning.
Good
Bright
morning.
shining faces at this new space here. You get, I'd give you 15 minutes extra just for finding the place. You know, since it's new to our rotation. But Virginia says no. Uh, Quick announcements, and then I'll introduce our first speaker, as always. Don't forget, if tomorrow night is the Bat Chat in Huntsville. And Virginia, you sent out a ton of information
Yeah.
about that, so you should have it in your email, map, where to park. The one thing we heard at the chapter meeting, don't park by the steps, wherever if you see steps, don't park by them because they get real mad. But otherwise, there's a parking lot in a Baptist church, there's one next door, there's.
There's a restaurant, yeah.
It's all in the email. Good place to eat there too, apparently. So you can eat and then go watch the bats come out to eat.
And there's no bathroom by the fence. So if
Yeah.
you need to go to the bathroom, you gotta go to one of those restaurants.
All right, we're off next Saturday. You get a Saturday off. Cause it's Memorial Day weekend. So, enjoy the Saturday, find a volunteer opportunity somewhere, pick up some hours. The last class will be the following Saturday at AgriLife on birds. A couple of really good presenters on birds, JoJo Bradbury and Linda Crump, thank you. Everything you ever know about bluebird, you can find everything you want to know about birds, you can find out. We had a couple of folks, are they here that went to the chapter meeting? Anybody go to the chapter meeting? Yes, right, Lauren was there. We had a lady present, who, by the way, it appears is gonna present at the state conference also. She gave me more information about bird feathers than I think was humanly possible to consume. Apparently, there are about 20 different kinds of feathers on birds that they all have a very specific use. So, come to the bird thing. If you're not a birder already, you will be by the end of that presentation. If you haven't given shirt sizes, the shirts are here for comparison if you want to compare. I think there's only about 6 that haven't. It's here. Working with bats through Texas Parks and Wildlife, I think it is. They're looking for some volunteers, especially out of the Huntsville area. The only requirement, and this includes if you'd like to get involved with the bat chats at Huntsville, is that you're a certified Texas Master Naturalist, not just graduated. But once you graduate, get your 8 AT hours and your 40 volunteer hours, you can then start volunteering if you're interested in working with these bat projects. So I'm using that as incentive for you to go find volunteer opportunities to do. Let's see, you'll be getting a note. It'll either be a poll or just a response for graduation, June 7th, 2 p.m. Family and friends are welcome to come. We just need to know how many. So we'll be asking, will you be there? How many folks are gonna be bringing with you? So we're ready for the onslaught. I said last week, we challenged the intern group to a project preparation because all of the junior master naturalists are doing one. So if they can do one, can do one. Heard this morning, a project, we're going to have a project on milkweed and monarch butterflies. I won't say who, it'll be a surprise who's doing it, but there's a project for that. That's coming. I think we even have a project where there's gonna be plants handed out. If I remember Maria, I think it's gonna do that. So, you know, if you've got a project, you got something you want to share, put up a trifold board, bring some samples, do some, Stephanie was the queen of the projects last year. She made her own, herbarium, where she went and collected all the plants, put their common and scientific name on them and pressed them, and it was like a forever kind of thing that she did. So, all right, our presenter, I'll get right to it. Presenter today, first off, I'm once again proud of the 2024 intern class. You know, it's like my class at A&M. I'm proud of all of the accomplishments that the class did. Dee was in our class as an intern last year. She could have taught most of the class, but she took it as an intern. Thank you very much. She's gonna present today, just real quick. Dee has her master's and PhD in botany, but her thesis and her dissertation were on mycology. So if there's ever anybody that could teach us something about this, there she is. So not gonna delay any further, I'll turn it over to Dee and she can introduce herself for the rest of the talk. It's all yours, Dee.
Okay. Okay, mycology is the word for the study of fungi. And hopefully this will be a nice introduction to this, what I consider a very amazing, weird, funky, mind-altering group of organisms. So the parts that we are going to look at today is why study fungi. We're gonna look a little bit at foraging, a little bit at fungal identification, a little bit at ecology. Terry couldn't make it today. And then we can have comments, and there will be time for questions in the center while we're going, and I'm even gonna ask it. You'll see there's a name here. Siluria quinaltiana lusk. My last name is Lusk. Any proper identification of a organism will have the person who named it. This is a new genus based on a new species. That was my master's thesis. That fungus is, likes it super wet. It is, the type site is on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington. Okay, I'm Dee. Mycologist, botanist, horticulturist, and I like to speak. Denise over here is my helper. She helps me with especially all the hardware issues that I have. We will be talking about edible fungi, so we'll get to some of those rules, but I wanted to make sure they were there in case I didn't have a chance to get to it. All right, so my first question for y'all. Why study fungi? As a naturalist, any thoughts? Why study fungi?
It's so, everything is interconnected and it serves such an important process for pretty much all of plant life. I mean, it would be impossible to not study it. Right.
Right.
The only thing that's coming to my mind is it possibly is an indicator.
Indicator
Of
of,
health of the soil, of health of the ecosystem, beyond that.
that's also very true. Any other ideas?
To learn what's good and bad about it. I mean, because some are good, some are bad. So
That's true, and we'll look
bad
at,
for, bad for the plant and bad for us, but good a lot of times.
we will, yeah, we definitely look at both good and bad and sort of qualify good and bad. Yes.
Also, I think, in terms of, similar to when we studied the wildfire, right, it gets there is a fear factor involved, and I think that it's important as naturalists to help, persuade people not to be afraid of fungi and to help understand,
Yeah.
be more comfortable
Mhm.
with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the word is fungophobia. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
It is a real thing. Any other thoughts? No?
Right now.
Okay, so from my perspective, somebody who's studied a lot, there's a lot of reasons. They're absolutely beautiful. They're, and all sorts of shapes and forms and sexual habits, and they're just amazing. Curiosity, just general curiosity to go out and walk in the woods and see a whole bunch of different mushrooms and learn about foraging. The curiosity factor is incredible. Of course, edibility. If you've ever eaten any wild collected mushrooms, chanterelles, lactarius, there's so many amazing fungi. And in fact, that one right there, that white thing is actually a fungus and it's very edible and very good. Green medicine, people will use like mushroom coffee and mushroom supplements to help their health. Just medicine, both human and domestic animal fungal diseases and fungal allergies. Pharmaceuticals. There's a number of pharmaceuticals that are based on what was originally fungal chemicals. Agriculture, again, plant and domestic animal diseases. Ecology, how the fungi fit into a system and contribute to the success. So for example, if you have a conifer forest, you're gonna find decomposers there, but you're also gonna find mycorrhizal fungi, and that forest will not function as well, be as productive, be as healthy without their companion fungus. So that's really cool. So what do we think the impact is on humans? Any thoughts? What impact do fungi have on humans?
Well, you kind of put it right there with the antibiotics, you know.
Yeah, I sort of gave a hint right there.
So,
That's one. What other kinds of impacts?
Nutritional value.
Exactly.
Medicinal.
Medicinal, yeah, that gave you kind of a list before. Okay, so it looks like we're at the end there. So from my perspective, it hits just about every fungi in one way or another, hit just about every aspect of human being. Mental, emotional, spiritual. The use of magic mushrooms, psilocybin, is getting more credit these days for helping with certain mental issues, as well as, shall we say, being illuminating. Physical, if you look at diseases like tinea versicolor, you have like dark skin, either tan or dark colored natural complexion, and you get these white blotches, that's a fungus. Has anybody ever heard of holy fire for the social? Okay, so the witch burnings back, I believe, in the 1800s. What happened there was this little, see the black ones and the white ones? This is rye, and the black's a little fungus called ergot. And it has a chemical in it called lysergic acid. Remind you of anything?
LSD, yeah.
LSD, lysergic acid diphthalate. And it basically does many of the same things. And what happened was that whenever there was a really bad ergot infection in the rye, they wouldn't take out the ergot. And so it would get ground up with the rye and put into rye breads. So whole communities would be high on LSD, basically, or LS in this case. And it led to what they called holy fire, and people having visions, and long-term use through bread. People were losing their fingers and the tips of their nose because it reduces circulation in the capillaries. So that's really happened, and it is a big deal, and it's still a big deal today. There are laws in place to disallow movement of ergot infected rye across state lines. So this is even legalized, so it's very social. And physical, commerce and losses due to disease. So let's take the next one. So what impact can a fungus have on our economy? Any ideas?
Destroy crops.
Destroy crops?
But it actually, we use mushroom compost and things to help them grow.
mushroom compost. But we'll go back to things like coffee. That's commerce. It's a product and people buy it and sell it. So let's take a look at my list. Well, okay, so I'm taking a look at the physical first. So this is a clip that I got off of Crop Protection Network, .org. And it looks at, this is Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas numbers. This is actually 25 million bushels. So this disease, stripe rust on wheat in this area, Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas. Just the stripe disease wiped out 25 million bushels of wheat. Little bit of effect on the economy, little bit, yeah. Then if you include the Fusarium crown rot, which is also a fungus, and the leaf rust, that adds 8,000 or 8 million, excuse me, more bushels of wheat lost to fungal disease. So we do have some major, especially agricultural issues, and this is just one example. Okay, so sellable fungal products, like I have up there Agaricus bisporus. Does anybody know what Agaricus bisporus is? No? Cool. It's the little button mushroom that you buy at the grocery store. I bet you every single one of you have eaten it. Research inspiration, such as pharmaceuticals and nutrition. So that has its own marketplace. Improved production of crops. Okay, in this case, I'm looking at things like mycorrhizal fungi that improve the production of our forests. If you look at products like microlife fertilizer that you use on your lawn, that all of your shrubs and your grass and everything needs those mycorrhizal fungi to perform optimally. There's a whole nother area of products, fertilizers that are focused on using these helpful fungi and bacteria. Then there's the sale of controlling agents like pharmaceuticals. You know, how do you get rid of basically fungicides? That's what we're looking at here. So if you have, you know, skin fungus, if you have a fungal pneumonia, if you have some other, you know, foot fungus, how many billions of dollars have been spent out of everybody's pockets to relieve foot fungus? So there's lots of ways that we're impacted that way. So, and then negatively, losses due to disease like that stripe rust. And then maybe most importantly to us, people who use fungicides in their yard. Okay, and it kills all the good fungi. So then you have to buy more fertilizer and you have to use more water and you have to do things like that to make up the difference. And of course, you look at all the fungicides and stuff that are used, and then the cropland that's not quite as good as it used to be because it's missing this important group of organisms because we've done too much fungicide. Okay, so foraging. Anybody interested in eating what they find? Woohoo! A couple of them. So this little collage here, every single one of them is edible. This one, really easy to identify. This is Lactarius deliciosum. When you're out in the woods and you come across the little mushroom that's kind of orange or red, red's a different species. And let's try to get these other two questions.
I was just gonna ask if we have morel.
I have been looking for records of morels down here, and I've talked to people, especially last year when I was taking the intern program, who were working like out at Jesse Jones and other places, and they say no, and I have not been able to find records of morels. But I know that like in the Midwest, if somebody's burning stumps and stuff, it's an easy place to find morels in the Midwest.
Right.
Even though I haven't foraged there, talking with many mycologists and many collectors over time. That's just the way it is in the Midwest. I'm not sure. It may be a little hotter down here than they like it.
So for someone that wants to start a mushroom farm on a small scale, so we live in a pine forest. It's the perfect place to do something like this. Do you have any favored place that you would get the oyster mushrooms or some type of?
I do not.
Or, okay,
I can answer that without you going any further. To be honest, the only type of fungi I have ever grown are cup fungi on a petri plate and psilocybin mushrooms.
okay,
Every good mycologist needs to grow psilocybin mushrooms at least once. You know, it's just because that's part of the initiation into the world, I think.
is this the magic mushroom?
Yes.
Okay, is this the red, is this the Super Mario?
No.
Or is the red with? the
No, I mean,
white? Okay,
I just went out and collected spores from psilocybin and grew it.
okay,
And in the Pacific Northwest, like psilocybin cubensis isn't as power packed, shall we say, as some of the psilocybin you find in Texas.
So growing up, our parents always told us never touch any mushrooms that you see growing. Because you never know if they're poisonous or not. How easy is it to, once you get that education, to be able to identify what's good and what's not? To where you have 100% confidence that what you harvest isn't gonna kill you.
Okay, so I
Hallucinations.
taught mushroom identification for 2 different semesters when I was working on my master's degree. Once you know what it is and you're used to foraging for it, it's easy. We're almost back to where we're but I will talk about that. The answer to your question is, if you're out foraging and you know what you're looking for, like let's say you're looking for a lactarius and you break it and it breaks and it bleeds orange, there's nothing else that does that. You know you got what you got. And you know you can eat it, and you know you're gonna have a pizza that's amazing tonight. You know, or spaghetti sauce with lactarius.
Yeah.
Or if it bleeds red, again, nothing else does that. And both of those are edible. Are we there?
Yeah, I might come back up again in a second.
Okay, so I think we got, let's go back a little way, whoops.
She needs to click the.
Click on that.
Let's go.
On the computer. Okay. Let's go back. Okay, so here's another one that's also hard to get wrong, chanterelles. And we do have them here. The thing is, these are folds, not gills. So like this would be called a gill. That's called a tooth. And again, the dentitums, most of them are edible. They've got kind of the same pointy.
Sorry. There you go.
They have the same sort of pointy color as the lactarius. I mean, this, you go out in the woods and you see this, you know that so there's certain things that once you learn them, they're absolutely good to go.
It's the little hand on
Sorry,
the left.
that one.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, so of these, this isn't a agaricus, this is a morel. esculenta. Once you know what a morel looks like, you know what a morel looks like. Now, there's some bad ones, but the bad ones look like brains, like literally like brains. This is an agaricus. Uh, angel cap and amanita. But no, you can see that those gills are pink. Those, you're not gonna have white spores. This is a honey mushroom. This is quite edible. A lot of people really love it. Armillaria or Armillariella, depending upon whose page you're on, species name Melia. It's, this is not recommended for beginners because it's, master of disguise. It can look a lot of different ways. This is shaggy mane, also very edible. And there's not very many things that look like this. Once you see this and you know what this looks like, especially if you see some older ones with it, you know you got what you got. And that it's edible. There's cautions that go with it. So, foraging rules. Number one, if you don't know what it is, don't eat it. If there was lots of time, I would tell you about a story when I started at a community college and, well, I'll just tell you, I started at a community college. And in this biology course, the advanced biology course, we got to do some camping, shall we say. There was a little house on the lake that the community college owned. I think they were donated it, and we got to go use it. And a friend of mine and I were out early in the morning doing a plankton tow. The first people up were supposed to go do a plankton tow. So we were out in the middle of the lake rowing, you know, plankton towing behind us. And we started rowing back in because it was time. We saw this activity on the beach, and it's like everybody was going crazy on the beach, like, what the hell? Time to row faster. And when we got in, this young lady had taken in, she'd just gone down like this and started chewing on stuff. And she, what is it?
Anaphylactic shock.
No,
That's what I.
no,
Started hallucinating.
ACE, it's you know, the really poisonous carrot-like thing. I can't think of it right now. Too many mushroom names. No.
That's.
Denise will find it. It's an APAC. It's, water hemlock. There we go.
Oh, yeah. What is
Water
it?
hemlock. She's chewing on water hemlock. So, the next part of our foray out into the wild was a visit to the hospital, so she could get her stomach pumped. So if you don't know what it is, don't eat it. Number two, foraging. The majority of fungal poisonings are actually food poisonings. They're not really toxicity of the fungus. People, when they're out in the woods, they think that something that is slimy with bacteria and riddled with bugs is more safe to eat than what you would buy at the grocery store. It's not. If it smells off, looks off, you know, it doesn't have to be pristine. I've eaten plenty of mushrooms that I cut the bug larvae out and, you know, cut the bad parts off and ate, and I've never gotten sick, but I don't eat the nasty stuff, ever. Okay, so fungal allergies are a super serious issue. As many of you probably know, here in Texas, it's one of the major allergies. Fungal spores in the air in particular, but it's also a food allergy. So if you're going to eat something for the first time, a wild mushroom, don't eat very much of it. A few bites. Second time you have that same fungus, maybe a few more bites, but that second time you eat it is actually more risky than the first because now your body knows to look for it and is looking for it. So when your body encounters it the second time, you're more likely to have a bad anaphylactic reaction. So those first couple times, moderate your intake when you're eating wild mushrooms. Basic story, stay out of the hospital. Don't need to go there for Oops, okay, so in general. Never eat any mushrooms that have rusty or orange colored spores. There are 1 or 2 species in that group. That have that color spores that are edible. But there's so many really, really good edible fungi out there. Why even bother? Just skip it because most of them are toxic. They won't kill you, but they'll make you sick as a dog. So I didn't get the picture on here, but you remember that shaggy mane, that cone-shaped one? There's a couple species that are a problem. So inky caps you can eat. But, first of all, the coprinus melts. It's called deliquescence. It means to melt, and they turn black at the bottom. You've ever seen mushrooms that turn black and it just looks like they're melting? That's the coprinus group. So the inky cap is edible and shaggy mane is absolutely delectable, but inky cap in particular produces coprine. Sometimes shaggy mane will have it, sometimes it won't, most of the time it won't, but still you need to be careful. Coprine is basically the same chemical as antabuse. Anybody heard of antabuse? Antabuse is a drug that they use with alcoholics to make them sick when they drink alcohol. Literally throw up. So if you're gonna have a nice plate of shaggy mane, or you find some beautiful inky caps and they're pristine, they're not starting to melt yet, and you wanna eat them, go ahead, eat them. Skip the glass of wine. No beer, no wine, none of that sort of stuff, if you're gonna eat from that group. Now, you might wonder why I say avoid things with rusty spores and I don't mention white. Because Amanita which has alpha amylin toxins, is our most poisonous fungus. And it has white spores. The thing is, there's very delectable things that have white spores that are worth learning. So I'm not gonna put white spores up there, because if you have the time to learn the mushrooms and you wanna eat them, learning some of those white things with white colored spores that are edible is worth your time. And Amanita is very, very distinctive if you really look at it. Now, you were talking about touching. When you're collecting for edibility, you're not just out collecting, but you're looking at, I want to take it home and eat it. You ask about touching all things. If you see what looks like an Amanita, nice, beautiful white or yellow or red cap usually with little buttons of tissue on the top, and you kick it over and it's white on the bottom and has that little annulus, whether or not you can see the cup underneath. Don't touch it with your hands, because then when you touch the ones that you're going to eat, you can transfer those chemicals that are toxic. So that's where that comes in when you're doing your field collections. If your purpose is to eat, be careful what you touch. You know, you may be collecting Lactarius and chanterelles and maybe even some teeth fungi all at the same time and taking them home to eat, but they're very distinctive. Don't touch your Amanitas. If you look at it and it looks like it's gonna have rusty colored spores, again, don't touch it. Those will just make you sick. And another one with white spores, which I have a picture of. Actually, when we get to the very end, the collections. Okay, so field collections. Is anybody ready for a short break? No? Okay. So, don't really bother to collect specimens for mushrooms that are obviously rotting or full of fly larvae. It's not really a big deal. Okay, So there's different ways that you collect things, and mushrooms go in wax paper. Always. And store them in the refrigerator in wax paper. No plastic, no paper, wax paper. Here's my fungi for the moment. You just take and put it in there. From the field and in the refrigerator, that way. Paper will dry them out, and plastic gives a very good opportunity for the bacteria that are naturally gonna be happening out in the woods to rock and roll and have a good time and turn your delectable wild mushroom into a pile of nasty juice. Okay, wax paper.
Is that advisable for mushrooms to buy at the store?
Yes. It is also advisable, okay, so we talked about do not touch. Don't mix different species together, especially if you're planning to eat them, because you'll also mix up spore colors. Set up spore prints when you get home. We'll talk about spore prints. Don't touch mushrooms if you're gonna eat them, like we talked about, poisonous ones. If eating, okay, I have never, ever washed a mushroom. Never have I put a mushroom under running water. It really takes away from the flavor, and it can also wash out some of the nutrients. Either collected from the field or from the grocery store. Take a knife, scrape off the dirt.
You answered it for the grocery stores.
Or the grocery stores, and never, ever have I put a mushroom underwater. Some people insist that they must run a mushroom underwater. Just, they're clean freaks. I grew up on a farm eating dirt, so a little bit of dirt's never gonna bother me. You know, if you're not eating a little bit of dirt, you're not challenging your immune system well enough anyway. Okay, so cup fungi, in particular morels. Again, don't bother to collect things that are rotting, because by the time you have a chance to look at them, they're just really gonna suck. Collect in paper bags. I didn't bring a paper bag, but y'all know what paper bags are. Refrigerate as soon as you get home, especially if you're gonna eat them, or allow to dry in the bag. Now with cup fungi, you actually want that drying action. If you're especially collecting to get to know the cup fungi, what will happen when you put them in the paper bag, it changes as the fungi dehydrate. It also dehydrates the cells that create spores. So a lot of times when you open the bag, of spores right in your face. So cool. So cool. So cool. And it happens really quite regularly. Okay, so what's in a name? Myco as a prefix, Mycetes, Myces, Mycota. Generally speaking, all of those refer to fungi. So Basidio Mycota, this refers to mushrooms and other fungi, and I put the word meiotic in here, so this is the same process that humans use to create eggs and sperm. It's a reduction division, spores on a basidium. And I didn't draw pictures of that for you, but basically the spores look like they're formed on an upside down cow's udder. So the spores, you see this cell form, and it has little points on it, like cow's udder, and the spores are blown outward. And so you're forming cell wall from cell wall, and then closing up the cell wall to produce the spore. They have a little itty bitty drop of water, and when a breeze hits it or something, it pops that drop and they fall off into the breeze. So that's why you have gills that point downward, and on a cup fungus, the asci point upwards, and that's why you get them blown into your face when you open the bag. Again, ascomycetes produced with an ascus, and basically you have a cell and the spores are formed freely in there. They're not blown out. So you have brand new generation of cell wall, which is unusual in the world. There's only a few organisms that free form cell wall like that. You change the pressure, and the pressure in the ascus changes, and then the cells blow out the top. It literally has to do with pressure coming up from the bottom and blowing the top off that reproductive cell and blowing the spores out. Very, very cool stuff. When I was studying, the first class I took was Basidiomycete class. I hated it. It took 3 different people to convince me to take the next fungus class, which was ascomycetes, and then I fell in love, head over tea kettle. Okay. So looking a little bit about what's in a name, just about any Latin name will tell you something about the organism you're looking at. So, or related groups. So there's a certain species, several of them, of soil-borne actinomyces. Is this a fungus?
Yeah.
And more specifically, streptomyces. Okay. And mycobacterium. Now, does this back you up a little bit? Is this fungus?
That's Myco in the name.
It's got myco in the name. These have actually, this is a mental health thing, and it's a reason for gardening with no gloves, getting your fingers dirty, because the chemicals that these produce, they are absorbed in your body and they help you release serotonin, thus increasing serotonin levels. Very good for you. But this group is actually bacteria.
Does the myces have to be at the end to be
Okay,
a fungus?
So in this case, we think of bacteria, what do we normally think of, like little cells, right? Rods and little circles and that sort of stuff, right? Single cell organisms. These bacteria, the reason why they carry part of the name that refers to fungi is because they produce hyphae-like extensions. So they look like fungi, but they're actually bacteria, and that's why they carry that name. Okay, so the answer is no. And the reason that they are bacteria is because they're truly prokaryotic. Have you guys ever heard that word? It means to have a nucleus that has no membrane. Well, we can't really call it a nucleus. They have genetic material that's not packaged inside a cell. So it's just sort of hanging out like everything else. Nothing inside a prokaryote is truly packaged. Their filaments are much smaller than fungal hyphae. So they look like it, but they're just real good fakes. And their cell wall chemistry is distinct from fungal cell walls. So fungal cell walls, you'll find chitin and muriatic acid in the bacterial cell walls. So they're different, but it's very cool because you're learning about the name. Oops, let's go back. So this is the fungus that I named. And let's break it down. What does it mean? So what I'm trying to do is relate to you guys that you need to really look at some of these names because they can tell you something important about what it is. So anybody know this prefix? What's it mean?
False.
False. This suffix? Anybody know the orange peel fungus? You see it pretty randomly. You'll see it everywhere. This is the genus of orange peel fungus. Phylluria. So what the genus name means is that this is not a true orange peel fungus. It's a false orange peel fungus. So the last name, this one you guys will probably never get, Quinault. Anybody recognize the name? Anybody been in the state of Washington? You know where it's from?
There's a national, forest, right?
Well, the Olympic National Forest, yes, but Quinault literally is an Indian tribe on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington. So Olympic Peninsula on the rain side, this is from a temperate rainforest. And the first type site is about a quarter of a mile from Lake Quinault. It's about 5 miles from the Quinault Indian tribal grounds. Their reservation. So that's what Quinault refers to. In Latin, the suffix "ana" refers to a place. So it is of the Quinault place. So when you look at names, doesn't matter whether it's a plant, an animal, or a fungus, there's pretty often, probably more than 50% of the time, something to be gained from digesting what that name means.
How long did it take for you to come up with that name?
Pseudoluria was really easy because when I took it to the lab, I took it to my major professor and it's like, this looks like Aluria, but it doesn't look like Aluria. It's off by a shade to the red. It's thick. We'll go look at the spores under the microscope. Okay, go and look at the spores under the microscope. Aluria has what's called reticulate spores. That means that the spore has an external layer that looks like a net. Okay, these spores are smooth. And it has a lot of adaptations to very wet areas. The only extension of its habitat site from the Olympic Peninsula of Washington, where the average rainfall is 100+ inches a year, has been along the Columbia Gorge near waterfalls and other, maybe some other waterfalls at this point, where again, you're getting 100+ inches. When I grew this out on a Petri plate, I had never seen a fungus that created little itty bitty, very waxy structures. You know, it had lots of hyphae, but then it would knot up and turn into these little waxy structures. Very, very cool stuff, very unusual. And amazing to find something that's bright orange that hadn't been named, not only not named at the species level, but not identified as something very different and indigenous. So, the most conspicuous groups of fungi that people look for, and I can't see how I titled that, are the mushrooms. This one's obviously a little land mushroom. Oh, this is fungal identification continued. This was in my yard. And this is a little cup fungus, also photographed in my yard last year. This was last year. This was not that long ago. It was after the last rain. So these are the groups that people are most interested in. There's a lot of other groups and there's a lot of people who study some of the other groups, but that's that. All right.
We have to look at it.
Oh, no, I can't find it. I can find this.
Just click in the.
Okay, there we go. So, mushrooms generally identified by physical characteristics by the color of the spore print. And sometimes looking at the microscopic features is required, particularly looking at the spores and certain chemical reactions those spores will have with a couple of given dyes. So this is, everybody's seen the big white fungus that makes green spores. This is a spore print of that. So, did I go there? Okay. Somehow I missed something from here, I think. Got off with going on and off. So cup fungi typically requires looking at the spores microscopically. They're not as easy to identify. Once you know a morel, if you want to collect to eat, you know a morel. And you're not going to take one of those crazy brain looking fungi home and eat it. Okay, so for identification, this is a very, very old version of Mushrooms Demystified. I looked to see if this plant book was still available. It's full of keys. You can get to a lot of things, dichotomous keys, if y'all talked about dichotomous keys. Very good work. This book is amazing. And it's good, particularly for the Northwest, but pretty much anywhere else in the country. It's the go-to for identifying mushrooms. It does have some ascomycetes in here as well. Some fungi, you just have to get a microscope out and look at the spores, but you can do a lot with this book as spore print and the physical characteristics of the fungus. This, one of my little prized possessions, actually given to me in person by Dr. Miller, who's the scientific advisor. It's not the author, but he's a scientific advisor. It's full of amazing, beautiful photographs. I didn't check to see if this is still available, but I kind of think it is because it's a field guide. I don't think it has necessarily all of the mushrooms in it that you may find in Texas, but it's going to be probably your best picture book. I mean, I know Dr. Miller. I know Dr. Miller as a mycologist and a mentor. Various mycologists, professional mycologists and academia mycologists would get together and go on field trips, and I met, and not just like talks, like national talks. And I met him on a field trip in Northern California. Very, very cool. Very nice man. So I know the work and it's really good because he was the advisor. That's always good to know. You've got somebody who knows what they're talking about. Oops. Okay. So let's take a closer look at spore printing. I don't know why all those names went the wrong direction. So this is
It's not on Amazon anywhere, not used or being published anymore.
bummer.
There's a different one by Metzer. With a different cover. It's got a moral on the cover, but it must be out of print too, because the paperback is almost $120.
Yeah, some of these are kind of pricey, but if you can find it, if you're out and about at, half price book or something, you might stroll through whatever scientific section and take a look and see if you can find it.
University of Texas Press.
Has it?
Texas Mushrooms, a field guide by Metzler with contributions by Orson Miller
Okay,
for $35.
there we go.
It's 100 something on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really need to shop around. Amazon isn't always the answer. Okay, so you can see, this is the fungus out in the yard. Chlorophyllum. And you can see that I did a spore print. So this is basically how you do a spore print. I took this little fungus and I cut the top off and turned them over so that the gills are down on a white piece of paper. I don't care if the spores are gonna be white, don't put it on a colored piece of paper. You can see white spores on a white piece of paper. And then I put a cover over it. That cover, remember the mushrooms, the way they release their spores is they have a little water that bursts and then they drop. So that's why you need to have that downward to see the color of those spores. You can see that this did not put out a great one, but it has that sort of brown, potentially rusty, colored spore. Also, in this case, the stem is hollow. There's no annulus, which would be that ring that you see with agaricus, like little button mushroom you buy in the store. And agaricus campestris in particular in fields, another one to learn to look for. Very pretty little guy though, out in the yard, just popping up. And this was after the last rain. I didn't find a lot out there. Okay, so this is probably a really good place for everybody to take a break, go get something to eat. Your textbook describes habitat. It talks about habitat and niche. Your book describes habitat as an organism's address, and that's on page 201. I have it written down there for you. So let me ask you this. Where do fungi live? What habitats? Anybody, any ideas? I gave you some ideas that you can pick from. Do you think that they live like in arid areas? Will you find fungus in the desert?
Yes, I think they're everywhere.
They're pretty much everywhere. You're right. What about aquatic? Do you think that there are fungi that live in water? I have a yes, I have yeses, and you're all right. Everybody who said yes. And this is actually a rock face, which in its own way oftentimes is a desert. There's interesting ways in which deserts are formed. Okay, so again, from your textbook, a niche, according to them, is an organism's profession. Profession being the way in which they make their living. So how do fungi make their living? Any ideas?
Break stuff down.
They break stuff down.
Parasitic.
Parasitic.
Food source. Food source.
But we're talking about how the fungi make their living. What food do they get and how do they get it? They decompose. A lot of people think that fungi are all decomposers. My question is that the case? No. Anybody for calling a fungus a potential predator? Yeah. I've got some yeses out there. Cool. I'm glad you guys are open-minded. Okay, so decomposers. Not all fungi are strictly decomposers. So what is a decomposer? Breaks stuff down.
It used to try this and makes it more consumable for lower level work.
Other things. Okay, so, right. And a predator doesn't do that. Which goes to the second question. When does decomposition begin? So let's look at it this way.
When something's already dead.
When something is already dead. Okay, so then we go to the question of what's alive. So one of my favorite places to look for cup fungi, with one exception, is various forms of dung. Now, and you'll find different types of cup fungi on different types of dung. Okay? It's just a fact that you won't necessarily find the same fungi in bear dung as you will in wolf dung or in sheep dung or, whatever. And along the way, I learned a lot of words for that particular fact of life. Did the fungus start that decomposition in that dung, or was the decomposition starting before the fungus started decomposing it? When did that dung, let us call product, when did that product or that resource that the fungus is using start to decompose?
The digestive system of the animal.
Decomposition literally starts with chewing. You've got enzymes in your saliva and that maceration, all of that is where decomposition literally begins if it's a product that is being eaten by another organism. And fungi are not limited to starting with, that dead leaf on the ground. Not at all. Some fungi, maybe, yeah, they like it that way, but other fungi are gonna like it already half baked. Okay. It's hard for me to see with the lights. Can you identify other modes by which fungi live? And we already talked about parasitism. What about this one? Does anybody know what kind of style one might call this?
Symbiotic.
Symbiotic or mutualistic. It depends upon whether you're old school or new school. New school uses the word mutualistic more than symbiotic. What about this one? It is parasitic. That is correct. Okay, so that's apple scab. Okay, so just to twist it a little bit, and we'll get there in a slide. Do you think that this fungus lives solely as a parasite? Is it just a parasite? Always a parasite? And when it's not on an apple that's alive, like overwintering, it's a decomposer. It can live on dead leaves, dead twigs, etc. Now, not all pathogens are like that. We have just a word called obligate, which means that's the only thing it can do, and facultative, which means there's something else it can do. We gotta figure that out. Okay, so lichens are a close association between specific fungi and specific algae. They're a very interesting and amazing group. You can even, just by looking at the lichens in the area, know how clean your air is. The cleaner your air, the more likely you are to get large foliose lichens on the ground and stuff. The more polluted the air is, you'll see the species of large lichens drop out, and you'll get down to the ones that are plaques, or the ones that are like feathers or look like little sponges. You get that way. Okay, so mycorrhizal fungi, they attach themselves to plant roots, taking in sugars. They take sugars from the plant, okay? Not exactly decomposition, they're being fed, right? But they're also doing some decomposition in the soil and acquiring nutrients and water and giving that back to the plant. So it's a very mutualistic, symbiotic relationship. Okay, so here's another mind twister, leaf endophytes. There are fungi that live inside leaves. That's where they live. They do their whole business inside a living leaf. And, what purpose does that have? Is it going to kill the leaf? Is it not going to kill the leaf? Some of them don't kill the leaves. Instead of killing the leaf, they're a good symbiont, let's say, because while they're taking sugars, they produce chemicals that when insects bite and try to eat are toxic to the insects or the feeder and inhibit that type of behavior out of those organisms which are sensitive to the chemical that fungus produces. Again, fungi can be a little twisted. They're not particularly limited. Oops. Where was I at? Okay. Let's go back there. There we go. Predators. Yes, there are predators. Members of the order Zopagales are predaceous and they literally hunt. They're not very large in terms of number of cells. They're usually either single cell or a few cells. Microscopic, you have to have a microscope to see them. And what they do is when they germinate, their hyphae will start to grow, and then part of that hyphae will produce a noose. Okay? And when they sense an organism going into the noose, they will blow up with water and catch that critter, unicellular like an amoeba or multicellular like a rotifer or a nematode. They'll catch it and then they'll digest it. Okay? And endo and ecto mycorrhiza are the easiest way to explain this. Endocellular, in other words, the hyphae actually puts its little poker into a living cell. Exo means that those don't go into the cell, but they just lap up whatever is offered around the cell, the proper cell. So this would be more like the latter. So some of these are definitely found in wet locations. Mosses, you wouldn't think a moss is necessarily wet, but when we have a rain and you pick up a moss, it's wet and it stays wet longer. And, you know, if you like, here's this little moss, just a little moss. This little moss is a whole habitat unto itself. There are rotifers in there. There are fungi in there. There are bacteria in there. There's all sorts of stuff in that little wet moss. If you get out a microscope and look, you'll see it. Been there, done that. Okay, so parasitism. I have here, one can easily consider a parasite as a well-behaved pathogen. In that the end game is only to live off the other organism, not to kill it. Okay, so this goes a step further than mutualism, right? Because we're actually degrading in some way or taking away from the organism we're living off of. Apple scab is ugly and it can change the shape of the apple. And it breaks down the part of the apple that it's around and changes the, like if you cut an apple that's got apple scab from the store, you'll see how the growth underneath has tightened up and almost made like a volcano right underneath it. That apple, it literally changes the tissue in the plant. I don't want you ever to forget that we do have human pathogens that are fungi. This is just the easiest one to pick on, but there are others. So this isn't gonna kill you. It won't look pretty, but it's not gonna kill you. Oh. I already talked about the apple scab being facultatively. I used that word already once, a decomposer. Okay, so pathogenic. In mycology, we consider a pathogen to be a fungus that attacks and feeds upon an organism until it's dead. So we're starting with a living organism. We're not starting with detritus. We're attacking a living organism and we're just gonna eat it up until there's no more to eat. And then we're gonna move on. And rust fungus is usually they'll make it through, but if they die, so what? There's another piece of wheat to move on to. There's another leaf to move on to. And in terms of humans, coccidiosis, histoplasma, and cryptococcus are agents that cause pneumonias in humans. Pneumonias, bacterial pneumonias are, you can get over them, they're not fun. But if you get a fungal pneumonia, your risk of dying goes way up. you may never make it out of the hospital. So I think valley fever was one of them, but there's others around.
As part of your study, what is a good natural antifungal you could find in the natural world?
Tea tree oil,
What about oil of oregano? Oil of oregano?
I have not read about that one,
Okay.
but it's very possible. A lot of those essential oils, the ones that you can use neat without diluting, and even some of the ones that you have to dilute, can be very effective antibacterial, antifungal. So lavender oil is another one, but I think tea tree's the one more looked at in terms of an antifungal. Okay. But again, be careful. Essential oils, like if you use essential oil of lemongrass and you put it on yourself neat, it's gonna burn like you're on fire.
Yeah.
So you just have to be very aware when you're using essential oils, what it is you're getting yourself into. Do a little reading first. Make sure that if you want to use it neat, you can. If you need to dilute it, that you do. Okay, so niche plasticity, obligate versus facultative relationships. Obligate refers to the inability to live by any other means. Okay, so let's say you've got a honey mushroom. Can it just live by as a decomposer? Answer that question is no. Like, let's say we have Agaricus campestris that lives in a field. Now that's gonna pretty much be, we don't use the word obligate about being a decomposer typically, but basically it's an obligate decomposer. You look at, okay, we'll leave it there. There are pathogens that can only be a pathogen. There are parasites that can only be a parasite, that can't go both ways. Facultative means the fungus can live by multiple, typically alternate means. Like the apple scab, it can be a parasite and it can be a decomposer. Host alteration is another plasticity that you'll find in fungi, where you have multiple hosts, that one part of the life cycle is spent on one host and another part of the life cycle is spent on another host. Unfortunately, I will admit to forgetting to bring a rust example, which I have in my yard, and I didn't get you any photographs, but rusts, like the leaf stripe, look like little orange, look like rusty plants, little orange pustules on the top or bottom of the leaf. Or stripes where there's linear eruptions of the spores. And a lot of those rust fungi in particular, they will be on one host for one part of their life, the diploid part of their life, and a different host for the haploid part of their life. So the part of their life that they're like you and I, where we have 2 copies of chromosomes in our nucleus, will live on one plant or one organism. And the part of their life that's spent as a haploid, analogous to eggs and sperm. But for fungi and many other organisms, that's a whole like life for them, will be on a different organism. So my point here being is that fungi can be really plastic, and depending upon what fungus you're looking at. Many of them only do one thing, but there's other ones that do multiple things. And so, especially like if you see a plant with rust in your yard, I just try to get rid of it, because I don't know if its alternate host is something that I want in my yard or not. So if I see rust, I just get rid of it. It's not worth having around. Usually they're just a pain in the patootie.
What do you do to get rid of?
Well,
I usually just clip it off, throw it away, or throw the plant away, better yet. So there's that little Malvaceae that's, well, there's a couple of them, but there's one that spreads that has almost like maple type leaves and a little orange flower, I think, that it grows prostrate on the ground, prostrate on the ground, and it gets rust really bad. And I usually just get rid of it. Okay, so in summary, fungi can be found just about anywhere. The hottest and driest rock faces to the Arctic. And in fact, in Arctic ecological systems, it's a primary producer of huge importance. What do caribou eat?
Moss.
Lichens. One of their primary food sources is lichens. Okay, and niches. There's just, if you name it, fungus will try and do it. I once read a scientific article where a plant pathogen had gotten into the lungs and was growing, which it should never, 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 never do, of an AIDS patient. So a super immune, compromised person actually had a plant pathogen, which, like I said, it should be obligate, it should never, never happen. But there's at least one documented case of it happening. Fungi are just, they'll blow your mind.
I love to read up on the zombie fungus that takes over ants.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it, but I haven't really looked into it too much. Okay, so what time is it? We're past. Okay, I want to do this just real super quick and we can come back to it if we get back in time. Our field trip today, it is super dry out there. I was on walking from 2 to about 3. No, before that, yeah, around 2 to about 4 o'clock yesterday. I was out walking and I did not find much. And I don't expect that we will find much because I sort of got turned upside down and around and I went way further than we're gonna go today. So, most of what I found was shelf fungi, so please keep an eye out for that. Various sorts of lichens. I did find a few mushrooms. Do you know the difference between a bolete and a regular mushroom?
I think it's because this one has a stem, the bolete, if it does have a stem, it's very short, but it's like beefier and kind of sitting on the ground.
Any other ideas? No? Okay. Gills versus pores. So if you flip it over, this has pores, like a polypore. But the pores are much larger and the look and texture is more like a fungus. What's in a name? Russula medica, I actually saw that out there, pretty eaten up yesterday. What does the word medica mean? Like to throw up. So this one, you definitely know you don't want to eat. And these are really easy. I mean, they don't look anything like the Lactarius sanguinifluus that bleeds red, although they're both red. And Russula and Lactarius both are really crispy. I was working for the Forest Service on Gifford Pinchot National Forest. And towards the end of the summer season, when our job was about done and we were all like pretty wound and ready to get back to school. One day we had a mushroom fight. There was a lot of russulas up and we were picking those and just throwing them at each other. And it was great fun. But this one, I don't know what it is. It looks like it's gonna be a dentinum, but I can't really tell. Okay, so things that I noticed that you probably wouldn't. So we have shelf fungi here. If you look, this is blown up from here, and you can see the little black spots in there. Those are actually fungal fruiting bodies. Less than 1 millimeter in diameter. Okay, and here's another one. Again, we're talking Ascomycete, and this is actually fruit body eruptions from a dead tree. But like I said, unless you're really, really into it, you're probably not looking for this kind of stuff. I also saw some cup fungi out there that were less than a millimeter and dried up, and so I didn't take a picture of them. Okay, so we need to walk. So what we're gonna do, I think I saw the bolitas down by the pond, so we can walk there and then, come back and depending upon the time, maybe do like a little stint down one of the side trails and back. Cause we've only got 20 minutes. Okay? Oh. From here? You're not gonna find anything here. I did forget, Denise, told me about the spore printing that I forgot to mention something. When you spore print something, I covered it. What I forgot to say is just leave it overnight. Both of those spore prints that you saw that I made were done overnight, and you can see that it depends upon the fungus, how cooperative it's gonna be. One of them, the chlorophyllum, it just put out so many spores that you could hardly see where the gills were. The other one, that's so few spores that you could hardly see where the gills were for different reasons. So when you do that spore print, cover it and let it sit there. Sometimes you'll be able to see it in an hour. Sometimes overnight won't be long enough.
Why do you do spore prints? Is it for identification or for propagation?
Spore prints can be done for identification. Propagation, it's better to sterilely excise a piece of tissue. Because when you do that spore print, you're gonna have all sorts of bacteria and stuff in there. When you try to put them on a plate to plate it out, you're gonna end up with everything in there and you're gonna have to go through multiple rounds of trying to isolate the fungus.
It's mainly for identification.
Mainly for identification, yeah, it's the biggest one step. I've done.
This is Tina Critchfield. Tina is a past president of the Piney Woods Lakes Master Naturalist chapter. Has done the training for them.
Training
director. In the past, just so you know, they used to do trainings like all day, 8 to 5 on Wednesdays. Wow. And they just moved to the Saturday schedule, which I think is working out great for us.
Yes, it is.
She also has put together the East Texas Conservation Expo that has happened and will happen. I said, I'm gonna leave it to her. This is Tina. We're going all about foraging, so you won't go hungry.
So you want that? Hi, and thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here. I will warn you, though, that I'm not really a classroom teacher. I'm an outdoors feral girl, and I'm used to just walking and talking. This is my very first ever PowerPoint.
So far impressive.
Thank you. It's very elementary, but I did it all by myself.
Wow.
My son tried to help me like the last, 15 minutes, and I was like, "Hun, I got this, just then run." You're just confusing me more with the whole chat GTE thing. Never mind. I've always been an outside person. My mom was one of those, push you out the door in the morning, lock the door, and you come back when it's dark. Which I didn't do that very well either, so. After that and career and kids, I went back outside and started following Mark Merriweather Wardbergen, which I'm sure many of you know. If you don't know him, I'm sure you've heard of him. He is the Foraging Texas guru. And I learned everything I possibly could from him. Decided I would become a Texas Master Naturalist because it was everything that I stood for. Nature, conservation, the outdoors, education, both giving and receiving. I am an education addict. I started the Master Naturalist training in 20. And I was like, well, this is just kind of cursory. They're just kind of scratch it. And I went back to Sam Houston to finish my degree in environmental science because I wanted all of it, all the botany and all the biology and all the science. So, and in the meantime, I originally from Houston, and my husband and I needed out. I'm an outdoor girl. Houston was not for me. And so we bought property in, East Texas. We are between Livingston and Woodville. We started out with 43 acres. We're at 73 now. We keep trying to purchase everything that becomes available around us so that we're totally isolated, because I love isolation and I love wood. So, the more woods, the better. So from the very beginning, before we even moved onto the property full time, I was out there every day walking and walking and walking and walking. I created a project in iNaturalist where I document every plant, tree, vine, bush, mushroom, insect, bird, anything that exists on our land. I have tried to document, and then started trying to figure out what can I do with it. I'm not really one of those conspiracy theorist, survivalist type people, but I do believe that the land will provide for us as long as we know what's there. And so I started researching the edibility or use of everything that I had documented. So it's been a long journey, but a very, very rewarding one. And I cannot hold all that information in my head the way that Mark does. I can't tell you right off the top of my head the chemistry of every plant, but I can tell you the easiest way for you to know. And that's what we're gonna do today. I am a certified master naturalist now. I went back in 22 and finished my training. And I recertified this year in February, because don't we all want a roadrunner? I mean, come on, that is like the coolest pin ever. And if you saw the TMN Tuesday about the Roadrunner, I literally want a Roadrunner, and we have one by our house. He just doesn't like hang out on my property, which is very disappointing.
Advertisements. If you don't certify, meaning you get your 40 hours
Yes.
volunteer and then you get 40 more this year, you can get a roadrunner pin.
You already have your Roadrunner.
I got it. Wednesday night in the chat.
Like,
So look for 80 hours total of volunteer work. And I'll certify it. And this is a only time in your career you can double certify.
Yes.
The two pins, the year that is already.
Exactly. And it is kind of an honor to double certify. It's not that. I also have a Facebook page called Daggett's Dream Foraging Adventures. You're welcome to look it up. Right now, it's a little outdated because, well, I spend more time outside than I do sitting at the computer, and I manage 3 business Facebook accounts for our ranch, for our chapter. So Daggett's gets kind of left in the dark. Is this the pointy clicker thingy?
Can you repeat the name of the Facebook?
Daggett's Dream. It's in the handout that I gave you on the bio page. You can go to the page and scroll down, and the about thing will explain to you why it's called Daggett's Dream. But I would love, instead of taking a foraging training time telling you where that came from, I would love it if you looked up Howie Daggett and found out for yourself. So let us begin. Wild foods are traditional foods that were perfectly normal to peoples who ate them. They can become normal for you too. That is so true. And, you know, it's so funny to me, people who first start out in foraging are like, you eat that? And then they try it and they're like, oh, that was good. And it was free. And it was organic. And you can collect it yourself. And then they're hooked. And I hope that you will get hooked too. So that was the about me, which I pretty much already covered. So, first things first, ethics and safety. Never eat anything, please, that you aren't absolutely certain that you know what it is. That can be very, very dangerous. For the most part, most of what I would find on my property wouldn't kill me if I ate it, but it would make me wish I were dead. There are some things that would make you wish you were dead. They will make you very, very sick. There are things that can have a level of toxicity that can kill you. And if you happen to be on prescribed medications, if you happen to drink or, you know, partake of recreational things, you need to be very careful of what you forage and what you consume. So, respect the land first and foremost. Never, ever, ever forage on private land unless you have permission. And I will tell you, where I live, I don't know how, I imagine most of y'all are kind of urban residents, but where I live, there's lots of property, lots of fence lines, and people's houses that sit way back off the road. They can't even see the fence line up front. Is it okay for me to forage there? No.
Plus they might have trail cams.
Well,
Fence line.
that and bulls and stallions that don't like strangers and pit bull dogs. And yeah, there are lots of hazards to foraging on land that you don't have permission to be on. But the other flip side of that, where I live, is that where I have permission to forage, you know, just inside somebody's fence line away from the road, people will drop by and they're like, what's she doing out there? And I've had people stop and ask me, you know, are you okay? Yeah, I'm just getting lunch. What? And so they ask, and they're like, oh, well, I just live right up the road. You know, you're welcome to come do that at my house anytime. Now they call me all the time. You know, oh, my sumac is putting out berries. Do you want to come get them? Or, of course, and I've worked out deals with most of them. Sassafras, a lot of the older people were in the area where I live, grew up with a grandparent that made root beer. And they didn't learn how to do it or didn't think it mattered. And now they can go buy an A&W or a Barb's or whatever, but they miss it. And so they let me come on their property. I harvest sassafras roots. I make the root beer syrup and I give them back a ball jar full of root beer syrup and usually a bottle of sparkling water to go with it. So talk to your neighbors, talk to people you know that own property, and just tell them, you know, I'm not out there to plow up your whole field or your whole forest. I just want to take some things. And usually they're very amenable. And then they're excited to learn, and then you spread that education and spread that love. So ask for permission. State and federal property. It is not legal for you to forage in Texas state parks. It's not legal for you to forage in national parks. There are some federal lands where you can get a permit to collect certain things, but you have to go get that. Don't just start picking things when you're in a park thinking that it's okay just because it's the great outdoors. Respect the resources. Never take the whole bush. As master naturalists, I'm sure that you've already started to learn, or you're adults, you know, that there are a lot of things that we're losing. And, you know, between climate and urban sprawl and development, we're going to lose a lot more things. So we don't want to remove whole entire plants from the landscape. Only take 1/3, but also keep in mind how much is there. So, you know, you happen to live down the road from you and you go take 1/3 and she goes 2 hours later and she takes 1/3. Well, it's not going to be long. That plant's going to be gone. One thing that I have learned over the years, especially where I live, is when you go down logging roads, which there are a lot of out by me, instead of foraging out there, I forage the seeds, I forage cuttings, and I take them back to my property and I propagate them. And that way, any forageable food that grows in East Texas, but it's missing from my property because the people who had it before us were all about agriculture and just like clear cut and destroy things. I'm trying to put back the way they should be. And so those plants should have been there. So if I take some seeds or I take a cutting and I get it rooted, I get it started, now I'm putting my land back the way it should be. And I'll have plenty for myself, for my family, for my grandkids when they end up out there in years to come. Respect yourself. Please don't stop on the side of the road and jump out of your car because, oh my gosh, elderberries. One, you will not win any friends or influence any people that way. You will make a lot of people angry. It's very dangerous. And usually you can find a driveway or a cut in somewhere and get off of the road. Also, the police do have the right to stop and give you a ticket because you're obstructing the roadway. So don't stop on the road just because you're excited that you saw elderberries. Get off the road. Don't forget to wear your snake boots because as y'all learned when you took your mushroom walk, snakes are a thing. And pretty much anywhere, especially if you're a berry forager, anywhere there are yummy things for you means they're yummy for somebody else. Which also goes back to the 1/3 rule. The same things that you may want to eat or make medicine out of are what? They're forbs. They're forage for the wildlife. The berries feed the birds. American beautyberry, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And maybe you've had jelly or made jelly from the berries personally. It's standing, it's too medicinal for me. So on my property, I leave those for the deer because the deer love them. That is like deer crack. So, keep in mind when you are foraging in the 1/3 rule that part of that 1/3 may be for the wildlife and you want to leave that there. Water, especially on a day like today, the whole thing about women don't sweat, they perspire. Hush, hush. Yeah, no. I have to have tons of water and I have this one, I have a big jug in my car. I carry Camelback when I forage, water, sunscreen, clothing, and proper identification, which we will cover in a minute. Again, please make sure you know what you're eating before you put it in your mouth. Chemistry. Chemistry is chemistry, is chemistry, is chemistry. The prescriptions that we take today that our doctor has given us that came from some lab originally came from the plants, came from a tree, came from some animal byproducts. You have to keep that in mind. That same chemistry that's in your prescription medication is in that plant. So be very careful when you consume that. If you are, had 20 margaritas last night and you're gonna eat this plant today, know what chemical constituents are in that plant that interact with alcohol, because the alcohol is still in your system and you could be creating an interaction. I have some of my favorite books up here. I have a huge library at my house. I am a true bibliophile, especially when it comes to everything conservation, restoration, and plant food. So, this book right here, it's cheap. It's like 18 bucks on Amazon. You decide you want to be a full-time forager and really pursue it. This is a good investment because you can look up the medication that you're on and it'll tell you what plants don't go with it. So just keep that in mind. And these books are on the reference page of the handout that I gave you. The picture in the top right up here. Anybody have any idea why I included them?
Pesticide, herbicides, right?
Right. Don't pick on the side of the road. Get away from the roadside. I mean, like on the other side of the fence. That's why I'm saying get permission from the property owner to get on the inside of the fence, because anything between that roadside and that ditch or the other side of the fence has herbicides, pesticides, runoff from the road, the asphalt, tar, oil and transmission fluid from your car, exhaust. Would you go out to your driveway and lick your exhaust pipe? Right, so the plants that are along the side of the road have been exposed to that, and that would be pretty gross, so I would skip that. Proper identification. Okay. I do use iNaturalist. I'm a master naturalist. What master naturalist in their right mind does not use iNaturalist? Not only that, I have walked and walked and walked and walked and walked and walked and listened and listened and listened and listened to Craig Spansley for the last 5 years. I teach iNaturalist. I promote iNaturalist, I market iNaturalist. iNaturalist is wonderful. If you haven't learned it yet, please do. So I use iNaturalist, and when I teach foraging, I use iNaturalist because somebody who's not a master naturalist and isn't already in love with plants and recognizes which ones are native, which ones are toxic, which ones are poison, which ones have really bad stickers, which ones sting you really bad. I want them to get used to an easy way to identify those plants. Do I only go by iNaturalist? Absolutely not. After we identify plants in iNaturalist, we go to this Bible, and you'll notice this is nice, clean copy, because I keep this one separate from my class, because all of my other books are like this. It makes it kind of hard when you're trying to show somebody in a class, and it's got highlighting and circles and everything else. This book is amazing. $26 on Amazon. Okay, and it's also in the reference list. But the cool thing about this book is that you take a picture of your plant on iNaturalist and you get an ID. And then tomorrow morning you wake up and somebody else has double checked you and said, yes, you are correct. That's what this is. And then you go to this book and you look up your plant, and it's going to give you pictures of what it should look like so that you can confirm again. It's also going to give you descriptions of what the leaf shape is, petioles, what the stem should look like, how tall it should be. Does it even appear in your area? I mean, it may look the same, but if it doesn't even grow here, yeah, you probably don't want to forage that and put it in your mouth. So always, always, always double and triple check before you start eating, and make sure that your identification is 100% accurate. Okay. I'm sorry?
Was trying to figure out which.
Yeah, Sam Thayer's Field Guide to Edible Wall Plants.
Okay.
It's relatively new. Yes,
Did you say that the 1/3 rule still applies to invasive edible plants?
no. Eat all. of them. Eat everything. Eat as much as you can and then eat some more. That is the best way to control invasive species, is to eat them. And there's no harsh chemicals involved, so you're doing a wonderful thing for the environment. Websites. Also on the list of references is a group of websites. My favorite, most amazing, of course, there's Foraging Texas by Mark Merriweather. And he can, tell you what you can do with it, and he will tell you chemical constituents of the plants. But he doesn't cover everything. And when you go out in the woods, and maybe you're on vacation, you go to Colorado, you go to Oklahoma, you go up east somewhere, not all those plants are on his website. So if you go to the NIH website link, which is on your handout, you can put in the name of the plant and it will tell you what its chemical constituents are. You will also find actual scholarly articles and studies using that plant. So you can confirm that, yes, it really does cure foot fungus. Playing around social media, I just learned this week that ivermectin does not only cure COVID, it kills human parasites and The only reason I have RA is because I have human parasites and I just need to take more ivermectin. And it cures echinacea, eczema, rosacea. Anyway, ivermectin is an cure all, and I did not know that. Okay, but I kind of doubt some of those claims, so I go to the NIH, NLMB PubMed website. I put in ivermectin and I pull up every study and I look for the one that says it's going to cure my RA. Because that would be so cool if it would cure my RA. Well, guess what? There have been that studies done, and there are some studies that show that yes, parasite overload can cause autoimmune diseases. But ivermectin is not going to cure my RA. So it's a little heartbreaking, but again, you can find out for yourself, is it really true? Do I really want to try this? Do I really want to eat buckeye seeds for breakfast, lunch, and dinner to cure my, hangnail? Probably want to skip that. So identifying before you pull up your iNaturalist, 3 photos. Please take 3 photos. Plant, tree, mushroom, whatever it is, please take at least 3 photos from the top, from the side, and from the underside. Does anybody know what this is?
Wild carrot,
Wild carrot. It has another name.
Queen Anne's lace.
It has another name.
I don't know.
Urtica doica. Okay. And is it edible? The root is edible, yes. But only if you know for a fact that this is Urtica doica. Because there's something else that isn't. So what you're looking for is this beautiful wide umbrella flowers that are all together and this little dot right in the middle. Because they all have that.
Okay.
Queen Anne's lace always has this little black purple dot in the center. How am I doing on time? Okay. From the side, you may or may not be able to see this, but the stem has little hairs along it. If you can see these little specks in the photo, I tried a bazillion times. It is not virtually impossible to photograph all those little hairs. But Queen Anne's lace has little hairs all along the stem. The underside has the skirt. And if you've ever watched one of Mark's videos about Queen Anne's lace, he tells a little thing to remember Queen Anne's lace. Queen Anne has hairy legs and she wears a skirt. Okay? Makes it super easy to remember it. Queen Anne has hairy legs and she wears a skirt. This is definitely Queen Anne's lace. But this is on the roadside right in front of my house with the Queen Anne's lace. Is it the same thing? No, it is not. This is not Queen Anne's lace by any stretch of the imagination. And even when I was out taking pictures of it the other day, I was very, very careful to make sure that I come over here to this one that I can touch and hold the stem and hold it like this so I can take a picture underneath so that I didn't touch a single one of these things because these things are nasty, 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 nasty. This is poison hemlock. And for some people who are sensitive to it, it's like a burn. It's like a chemical burn for me to get that on my skin. And it is miserable. So you notice that the flowers aren't all together in a solid round the way that the Queen Anne's lace. It has these individual umbels that are spaced out. It does get white flowers on it, just like the Queen Anne's lace. Not Queen Anne's lace. So see how it has this branching going off of it? Queen Anne's lace doesn't have this kind of branching. And no, I'm not a botany teacher, so no, I can't give you all the correct names of all those things. There's no skirt here. There is no skirt here. And this is a very smooth stem with no hair. Okay? You do not want to pull this up and eat this root because one, when you grab it and pull it up, you're going to get the fluids from that stem on you. And if you eat that root, you are going to be one very sick puppy and going to the emergency room. Okay. Yes,
Say again the name.
the poison hemlock. Yeah. Some people call it cow parsley, some, yes.
Is the oil or whatever it is it photoreactive or photosensitive?
That's a good question. I don't know that for sure.
I thought that's what made it blister on some people is that it really.
That would make sense. That would be logical to me, but chemistry is not my claim to fame, but that would make sense. But yeah, it burns me. Ironically, I've never had a reaction to poison ivy in my life. I even grab it, not intentionally, but there's a reishi mushroom right at the base of that tree and I want it, but there's this stupid, what is this in the way? And I move that out of the way and I go to cut the reishi off and then I look at the plant that I just grabbed multiple times and moved out of the way and it's like, oh my gosh, you're so stupid. You know, and I'm prepared, okay, you know, go in, wash my hands with a Dawn soap and wait and see. Nothing. This, I might as well have eaten it because it makes me wish I was dead. I mean, it's horrible, horrible stuff. So, again, yes, I did say eat them. But don't eat them if you don't know for sure what they are, and don't eat them if they have been sprayed. So if you live in an urban area, neighborhood, you're kind of limited on where you can forage, right? So you might as well walk around your neighborhood, see what's available. Maybe your neighbor has berry bushes in their front yard, and maybe this neighbor over here has plantain growing along their sidewalk. Are you gonna harvest that plantain and take it? No, because most people who live in urban areas and have HOAs have to keep their lawn under control. And they probably have a lawn crew and they probably have chem lawn. And the stuff that was right next to the sidewalk has also been oversprayed from the road. So no, don't do that. Always look for insects on the plant material before you harvest it or before you put it in your mouth. There are some good insects, not saying don't eat insects. And if you are one of those who's interested in foraging insects, I can also recommend this book. There are lots of good bugs. Don't knock it till you try it. And, you end up really hungry out in the woods and you need to survive. There are some really high protein bugs like grubs and crickets and things like that. Mold or fungus. I know you just took the mycology class and there are some molds and fungus that I would actually eat and actually do. But I don't want them on my greens or my yummy vegetables. So those I usually leave for that way. Most fresh greens that you can forage, like dock, cleavers, henbeds, swirls, and surely there's several people in the spring who have tried wood swirl before because even kids do that. Yummy stuff. Most of those, you can just harvest them, take them home, put them in a strainer in your sink, rinse them with a little cold water, toss, and put salad dressing on them. And just eat them that way. Some of them are good if you saute them in a pan with a little bit of butter, like fresh spinach. But again, if you research before you eat it, you will find out which ones absolutely have to be cooked. I am not a fan of Vitalaca Americana. I know a lot of people grew up, especially where I live in East Texas. A lot of people grew up, their grandma made it all the time. Poke salad. Wonderful stuff. Best greens ever. Everybody eats poke salad, not this girl. If I have to boil it, drain the water off, boil it, drain the water off, boil it, drain the water off 4 times for it to be safe for my consumption, I'm not that hungry. I really am. And that tells me something. If you really have to boil it all those times and drain that water off and boil it again. Yeah, I think I'll skip that. And the berries are toxic. I mean, I know a guy in East Texas who takes one of those berries a day and keeps trying to convince me it will cure my RA.
Yeah, that's bad.
That's good for you. I'm a little bit more cynical and conservative. And like I said, I'm more of a research kind of girl and I want something to back up. I don't know the chemistry the way that Mark does, so I need to research and make sure. Many things that you can forage in your yard. If you have hibiscus, if you have Turk's cap, hopefully you all have Turk's cap because Turk's cap is like the everybody food. Turk's cap, you can use the leaves off of the Turk's cap and eat them. You can steam them. You can like blanch them in hot water and then roll meat and rice and make like grape leaf dolmas. You can eat the flowers. And if you don't eat the flowers, when the fruits come, you can make apple jelly. I personally eat them. I have tons of Turk's cap. When they start blooming, when they start fruiting, I walk around and I collect the fruits off of them, and then I walk around other areas of my property where there isn't Turk's cap. One for me and one for me and one for you. That's how I spread plants on my property. So funny, people come to me or call me and they'll, oh, well, so-and-so told me you're a master naturalist. You must have the coolest gardens and you must have the most wonderful landscape. Can you teach me how to make this kind of garden? You got the wrong person, I'm sorry. I can refer you to a master gardener that I know who's also a master naturalist and she can help you with that. I am not a gardener. If I am a gardener, I am the laziest gardener you will ever meet in your life because I love natives. Why do I love natives? They belong there. They belong there, and that means I don't have to do anything. Not all this babying, having so many hours of sunlight a day and special water and just like passion fruit. The passion fruit at the end of the season, when those start getting ripe, when they start turning yellow and getting wrinkly, I'll walk down my back fence line because they grow all along my back fence line from my garden and my compost area. I walk along that back fence line and I'll pull them off and I stick my thumbs in and I pull them open and I just bite the whole inside out. And I throw the shell back over the fence line and then I walk around. That's how I plant. And it works. It works. And then when they start coming up, and now I do have some in places I don't want them, well, guess what? I take my little shovel and my little, nursery buckets out there and I start digging some up. And, oh, this Master Natural wants a passion vine, and this Master Naturalist wants a passion vine. And, oh, we're gonna sell some at the expo day in September. Oh, I'm gonna donate some to the Master Gardeners for their plant sale. One thing with purposeful. Same thing with my comfrey, which you will learn if you become a forager, the things that you really enjoy eating. You will learn things that you can eat and you'll be like, yeah, I guess if I were on, Survivor and I needed to live, I would eat that, but I'm just not a fan of poke salad. I don't like slimy greens. It's a texture thing for me. If you have to boil it 4 times and drain the water off to be able to eat it, that's gonna be slimy. No. So once you discover what you do like, and it has the most nutritional value for you, and maybe your kids like it too, so it's worth keeping it around, transplant some to your property because they make great garden beds. Comfrey to me is one of the prettiest plants. They have big green leaves and they put out, the stem that comes up in the middle and it has these little pink bell-shaped flowers. I have some right now that's blooming. I have some that I harvest before the blooms. I have some that I cut the blooms off and I make tincture out of them. But that's because I spread those seeds so that I would have more and so that I would be able to use different parts of the plant at different times of the year. Don't forget, know your bugs. Follow Bugs by the Yard. Follow Wizzy Brown and learn your bugs because you're gonna wanna eat some of those, I promise. Again, back to the chemistry. Didn't I do good with it? Chemistry. As a master naturalist, you learned that we don't use common names. We shouldn't, we do, but we shouldn't use common names, and why is that? Butterfly weed. Butterfly weed, butterfly weed, butterfly weed. How many different butterfly weeds are you aware of? I know of 5 that people call butterfly weed, and a very dear friend of mine, she's a great gardener, but she keeps wanting to give me butterfly weed. The first time she brought me this little pot, and I'm like, what is that? She said, it's butterfly weed. I said, no, it's not any butterfly weed that's going in my yard. Not happening. So unfortunately, common names get used for a lot of things, and what I think is butterfly weed and what you think is butterfly weed can be 2 completely different things. So make sure when you identify your plant, make sure you pay attention to the Latin name, the scientific name for that plant, so that when you go to the NIH website, you put in the Latin name of that plant. Don't use the common name of that plant. Okay. Sorry. For those who don't use the internet, I'm sure there's several of you in here. In case you don't use the internet, this book is your NIH PubMed. This is a very expensive book though, and it's getting harder and harder to find. And I will tell you, with any of these books, I buy these pretty frequently because I usually give them out when I teach foraging classes, the full 3-hour foraging class. So I need them to not be very expensive. I find them on A-Books, thrift books. Even on Amazon, I go to the used book and it gives you like half price books and thrift and all that kind of stuff. And I can get them pretty cheap. This one is getting harder and harder to find, but it will tell you the chemical makeup of the plants. It will tell you contradictions, this could cause you this. It will tell you if you are pregnant or nursing, don't eat that. Don't make a tea out of that. Don't use a tincture of that, that kind of thing. So this is also on the reference page of the book. There's a website, EMC, NCBI, NLM, NIH. And also keep in mind, things like not just your medications, but your social life. There are certain sunscreens that I cannot use because I consume certain herbal concoctions that interact with certain sunscreens. So again, that's another thing to keep in mind. It's not just the pharmaceuticals that you take. It's not just the drugs that you consume or the pot that you smoke or how many margaritas you had last night. You have to be careful because chemistry is chemistry, no matter where it comes from. So, if any of you have wet areas in your yard or, have property with a pond, or there is some out here in this wet area on the backside of the parking lot, not weed. Smartweed, Polygonum, peppergrass. So when it comes to chemistry, when we first bought our property, we were overrun. We have 3 ponds on our property, and it had spread from like one pond across the wet area of a pasture to the other pond, up the overflow from that pond. It was everywhere, and my husband was determined he was going to mow it all. I'm out foraging in the woods while he's mowing pastures. And I go up to the house to refill my water jug, and here he comes, and his face is red, and he's crying. He's like, oh my God, I don't know what I got into. Something's killing me. So I go walking out there, and I'm like, there's nothing out here that would cause that. He must have got stung by something. The next day, he's still mowing all that smartweed, Here he comes again, red face, crying, and he's just miserable. He's dying. I'm headed out to the pond. We have Canadian geese that come to our big pond every year and nest and raise their babies, and then they leave in July. The geese were out there, so I'm headed out to the pond. I'm walking through the gate to the pond, and I stop and I pick up a piece of, and stick it in my mouth. I'm horrible about that. I know it's hypocrisy, but I walk and eat all day long. Pick up a piece and I put it in my mouth because I like it. I love bitter crust and smartweed because they have that little bite to them, you know. I got a little bit of a big bite and my lips started burning on the inside and I thought, that's it. So I grab a piece of smartweed and I go running across the pasture all the way back to the barn and I'm anxiously waiting for him to come back on the tractor with his red face and crying, you know, and I'm like, here, try this. And he's like, really, Tina? Yeah, I get it now. I get it. He puts the whole thing in his mouth and chews it up. So now not only is his face red and he's crying, now he is spitting mad, literally spitting mad. Why would you give me that? I said, because I figured it out. I feel so stupid as a forager. I figured out what it is. He's pepper spraying himself. He is mowing all of this smartweed and he's aerating it. And that's what was burning his eyes and his skin. So keep that in mind. Chemistry is chemistry, no matter what it is or how you're using it, whether or not you're eating it, you're drinking it, or you're mowing it. There's still chemical constituents in that plant. So that's my funny story. And I told him yesterday, I said, you know, he asked me if I was ready and I said, I am. And I'm gonna tell him your funny story. And he said, I don't think that was a funny story. So this is just an example for you. I don't know if you can read this from afar. I tried to make it as big as possible and squeeze everything in. So this is just an example. This is elderberry. And this is what the herbal vademecum tells you when you look up elderberry. It tells you its constituents and what the chemical makeup of the plant is. It tells you its properties, what it can do, all the good things about it. Different ways to use it as a tea, as a gargle or a mouthwash, as a poultice, as breakfast food on your English muffins. No, actually it doesn't say that, sorry. Where's that book? That was here. The Forager's Chef, that gives you the recipes for the breakfast food that you put on your eczema. And this is legit stuff. This is not your friend on social media that says, I smeared elderberries on the sore on my knee and it healed it. No, herbal vademecum. Then I went to the A to Z guide to drug interactions, and it says at the time of writing, there were no well-known drug interactions with elderberry. I have an autoimmune condition. I was harvesting elderberries every year. I live in East Texas. It's moist. We live on a creek. I have them everywhere and I've been spreading them everywhere so that I could make elderberry syrup for all my friends and family. My daughter sells it down in Wood City to all of her neighbors. I make elderberry jelly and we were consuming tons of it. And I was getting worse. The wonderful thing about elderberry is it's an immune booster. It helps keep you from getting sick, which is amazing. And it's a really great jelly. My grandgirls love this stuff. But if you already have an immune system that is running rampant, you don't need an immune. So just be careful. Remember, chemistry is chemistry, no matter where it comes from. Supplies. This is a fun part, the really fun part. So obviously, books are supplies. And as a forager, as an herbalist, as a chef, books are your friends. I know everybody has the internet, but what are you gonna do when the internet goes down? I mean, seriously. And if you are a conspiracy theorist, you know, Musk can like take out the Starlings whenever he wants to. This is a wonderful little book right here. It's like $7, but it's amazing because it has cheat sheets in the back that tell you if you are going to try and make medicine out of plants, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, you name it, it tells you the formulas for making those things. And if you're gonna even try that, you want this book. The other thing it tells you that's very important, and Mark has whole entire like 2 hour long videos on this, is when you look up in the herbal vademecum or on the NIH website, and it tells you that this plant has flavonoids, it has polysaccharides, it has tannins, it has phenolic acids. You need that information to know how to process it. Because some of those things need alcohol to process them, or they need water to process them. Some of them need hot water, some of them need cold.
I'm looking for.
Tell me when I'm getting close. How much time?
It's 11:06.
What was the name of the book that you just?
Making tinctures beyond the folk method. So this is the folk method right here. This is Prunella vulgaris. You probably know it as heals all, self-heal. It is a miracle. It is the most wonderful plant ever to me because it does everything. I have GI distress. I make a tea with this. It's better than that slimy aloe vera because it soothes the lining of the GI system. Wonderful stuff. I sprayed my gum with my toothbrush, and now everything is agitating and it won't heal up and it burns. And so I make a mouthwash with self-heal and I gargle with it for a couple of mornings, 3 mornings. It heals up, it goes away. I make lotion with this. I make salves with this because every skin ailment imaginable for real, not like Facebook for real. I mean, like for real, for real. Hemorrhoids, boils, cold sores. This stuff is wonderful. But in order to do that, you need to make an oil or a tincture out of it first. And this is the folk method where you take a jar, you make a mark on it, like here the halfway point, you fill it with herb material to that point, and then you fill it the rest of the way with alcohol. And again, you need to know, does it need to be 100 proof alcohol? Can it be 60 proof alcohol? Can it be 90 proof alcohol? You need to know that so you know how to get the best bang for your buck out of this plant material. Because as we know, plants aren't gonna live forever and we may run out, so we don't want to waste it by not using it properly. So if you decide that this is something that you're interested in, please invest in this little book. Yes, ma'am.
I have a very specific question on the transplant from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Where do you get your 100 proof alcohol? I've experienced a lot of experience in doing this stuff.
Uh-huh.
So where do you get that in Texas?
Zips
There's real
liquor.
strict rules in Pennsylvania.
Zips liquor. I live in a dry county,
Yeah,
but I drive over a county to Zips liquor
you can get it there. Oh,
and I get the,
you need a license in Pennsylvania.
oh, that's crazy.
I know.
I wish we had to have a license here, but no, you don't have to have a license. Yes, ma'am.
Self-heal growing on your property.
Everywhere.
It's called self-heal.
Is it common self-heal? That's
Right, Prunella vulgaris, Prunella vulgaris, Bulgaris. Yeah. So yeah, just keep in mind, you need to know what's in it and you need to know which way to process it properly. Oil, you can do this way, the folk method. I buy mass quantities of safflower oil because I prefer, it has its own healing qualities. It doesn't leave me feeling breezy and blech. It soaks in, my skin absorbs it. I also, because we raise beef and we raise grass-fed beef and sell it, I also get all of my beef fat back and use the tallow to make salves with. Because again, it doesn't sit on the top of my skin and make me feel breezy and yucky. It absorbs, and tallow has its own healing qualities. But you can do the same thing. Dry the plant material, put it in a big jar, cover it with oil, safflower, olive oil, sunflower oil, jojoba, you'll want to learn what those all have different qualities. Also, I don't heat mine because to me, heat is death. I mean, it's like vegetables. You really want to get the nutrients out of your vegetables and your plant material. What's the best way to eat it? Well, what happens when you cook it? You kill a lot of the good things in it. So I try as much as possible to just eat things raw, like when I walk through the woods. And I try not to heat plant material. I do dehydrate mushrooms just simply because they spoil really fast if you don't. But plant material, I try my best to air dry it, so sun dry it. We don't have a dining room anymore. It is my apothecary and it's got lines running back and forth across the ceiling where I have plant material and the table gets covered and anything that drops off, I'm not letting go of it. It's gonna be right here on the table. Fill it with oil and I set it in a sunny spot. And I turn it constantly. I shake it every day, a couple of times a day, set it back in the sunny spot. And I will leave it there in that sunny spot for a couple of weeks. Depends on my schedule. I just make sure that myself or my husband turn it every day or shake it so that it gets everything out of it that is good. If you're a tea drinker, you already know about this thing. If you become an herbalist, you better know about this thing. The days of the little old metal ball that you put stuff in to drop in your cup and then it falls open and then the tea's all full of stuff. Throw that sucker in the trash. Get you one of these. $12, Amazon. Amazing. You can use loose leaf teas and not have all the little bits of stuff sticking in your tea. You can use plant material. I could dump this thing in here, pour warm water over it, let it steep for 8 minutes, and then set it on my cup. And I'm just going to have an herbal infusion without all the little bits of plant material stuck in there. These are wonderful things. It's a tea infuser. It has a little mesh filter in the bottom. And if you set it on the cup, it lifts up and it releases the liquid. So,
You're comfortable being plastic?
yeah. I am, but I also have a glass one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's easier to try than also too. And to get people started,
Yeah.
they're cheap giveaways when we teach you guys. Foraging itself. Don't pick berries and use your shirt unless you really, really are into tie-dye, which is, hey, I'm totally cool with that. My grandkids and I do it. Pepper vine. Who has pepper vine? Come on. Everybody raise your hand because I know you all have pepper vine somewhere on your property that you're trying to get rid of, you're trying to kill. Those berries, do not pick them and put them in your mouth. They have little fine hairs on them that will make you miserable. You can make juice out of those berries. My grandkids and I did it one summer, just because to me, I want to try everything there is to try on my property, and I want to do it with my grandkids so that they know. My middle granddaughter is probably better than the mycologist that was here before me. She can tell you every mushroom. She can explain gills, pores, stems. She can tell you which ones are edible. She can tell you which ones will make you sick if you don't cook them. She can tell you which ones you can live off of. That was my goal from the very beginning, is that each of my grandkids knows what they can use and what they can use it for on that property after I'm gone. So pepper vine, one summer, we experimented. We collected all these very ripe berries and we made the juice. Well, you have to, like that whole poke salad thing, you've got to strain it off. You've got to let it settle. You've got to strain it off because all those little hairs are still in there. It was not worth it. We were all very, very disappointed. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do with this big? I use pickle jars. I collect pickle jars and I use them for making things, especially my oils. What am I going to do with this big pickle jar, this purple juice? We all had it on us. We had, our fingers were dyed, our clothes were dyed, and I'm standing there and I'm looking at, I know what we're going to do with this. We made tie-dye shirts that summer. It is a wonderful dye, wonderful. It even dyes porcelain. Still got it this summer. So when you go foraging, try to use something with a mesh so that you have airflow, especially if you get into mushrooms. You don't want them to be in a bucket where they get squished down and they don't have airflow, because they'll already start to be slimy by the time you get them home. And you're losing the quality of your harvested product. These are really cool. Again, Amazon, yeah. But you can get these at Walmart. You can get these at the Dollar General even. I have found these at Dollar General in a 2-pack, and it's a little backpack. So you can like forage and carry it on your back, and you don't have to worry about having your hand tied up with something. I will tell you though, that this mesh does catch on trees if you're like crawling under stuff, and it will connect you to a barbed wire fence if you crawl under a barbed wire fence. Not that I've ever done.
Just say.
Yeah. Not me, I wouldn't do that. So peanut bags, whole, prickly pear.
Ouch.
I also volunteer for Texas Wildlife Association, and I teach foraging with Texas Wildlife Association. And at the Hunters Award ceremony last year, I harvested prickly pear pads, and we had a completely wild game dinner, which was elk and deer and yeah. And I did Napolitas, and well, I still have little things in my fingers. Cheesecloth, glass is best, okay? Glass measuring cup, glass tea, infuser, metal, stainless steel is best. It doesn't hold germs. It doesn't stain. Sharp knives, you definitely want to have a sharp knife or a sharp pair of pruning clippers that are only used for foraging. You don't want to use them on other things and spread things around. This knife is my favorite until one of the dumper dogs that people dump on
Oh, class.
our logging road all the time. My husband thought we should keep him. He was a chewer. I've never seen a dog that chewed everything, including knives. But this is still my favorite knife. Sharp, very sharp. Getting a little well worn, but you want to have a good sharp knife that you can cut things with and not tear them, because you do a lot of plant damage when you tear. And sometimes you end up pulling up the whole plant, roots and all, and then you feel really, really bad. It's better to cut than it is to tear or pull. Cheesecloth, everybody uses cheesecloth, and cheesecloth is a great strainer, but it gets really expensive if you're doing a lot. You go to Joann's, Hobby Lobby, Fabric Place, even people sell it online on Etsy, muslin. I can get a whole bolt of muslin. Well, I have a whole bolt of muslin at home. I also sew, and so I use it for quilt backing, but it's so much cheaper to just cut off a piece of muslin than it is to get these little packs at the store that has 2 little pieces of cheesecloth in it. I need those 2 pieces to do one batch, especially if you're doing elderberries. So muslin is a great money saver. Plastic bags and plastic containers, seeds, nuts, berries. As a master naturalist, believe me, you too will have a tub in the back of your vehicle. I don't care what size vehicle it is. You will put a kid out on the side of the road to make sure there's room for your tub, which will have gloves, plastic bags, pruning shears, sharp knife, some tape, some Ziploc containers, because you will want to collect seeds everywhere you go. And then you'll want, when you get to the chapter meeting, you're gonna want to run out and get one of your Ziploc bags or Ziploc containers and bring it in so you can trade seeds with somebody. It will happen, I promise. This is to make a drip tincture, and I would recommend that if you aren't really brave, that you go on Etsy and you buy one of these from somebody, because I have a glass cutter. I have the big, This one right here. I cut these with a glass cutter. I've also cut myself. I've also had a whole entire wine bottle explode in my face. Because even when you use a glass cutter, you still use heat around that cut. And you've got ice cold water in your sink ready and waiting. And then you put the bottle in it and it goes pop. And it comes off, the bottom comes off. Most of the time. In that case, the whole thing shattered and just, I mean, I'm holding it like this and the whole thing just. So, I really highly recommend that there are people who do this all the time and sell these, and it's worth it to just order one than to try and do it yourself at home. But the cool thing about, you can also use a coffee filter, which I do for classes, just because I'm not gonna cut the bottoms off of 25 little bottles and hurt myself. So for classes, everybody gets a little jar like this with just a ring without the cap and a coffee filter and a cotton ball. And what we do is we put our herbs with the cotton ball at the bottom. We cut a hole in the coffee filter, stick the cotton ball in, put our herb material in there, and we put it on this jar. And that's how I teach them to make a tincture. The problem with that is you don't have as much control over the flow. That's the beautiful thing about using a bottle like this with this lid, is that you can put your cotton ball in there, you can put your herb material in there, and you can close this lid either just a little bit or leave it a little more loose. And that way you can control how fast your fluid comes out and how much plant material you get in it. So, grinders, I've gone through, I don't know how many, little Krups, coffee bean grinders, and my husband was like, okay, stop. Please. Do not put roots in the coffee beaker. I mean, I had one in the cabinet that said mushrooms only. I had one in the cabinet that said roots only. I had one in the cabinet that said coffee only, and he said, please stop that. Stop. This is an industrial grinder, which I can tell you, if you decide that the most wonderful antifungal, foot fungus, athlete's foot, jock itch destroying thing in the world is black walnut hulls. But if you have ever tried to get into a walnut from its hull, it is virtually impossible. I've heard of people hitting them with a sledgehammer. I've heard of people lining them up on their driveway and driving back and forth over them, and they still wouldn't break, Well, I let them dry. I cut the hull off of the walnut and I let them dry. And when they're dry, you could drive back and forth over them all day long. They're not gonna break. And they don't work in coffee grinder, just don't even try. So, this is an industrial strength grinder, and it grinds walnut hulls, it grinds prickly ash, bark, it grinds dock root, which, if you want to use dock roots, you have to let them dry for 2 years to really be useful. And when that happens, they're harder than walnut shells, and they don't work in a coffee grinder. So industrial grinder, it's a wonderful tool. And then you can use to make salves and things. So that is my presentation from the classroom standpoint. How did it?